Last week I received a message from a viewer that made me stop everything I was doing. She wrote, "I finally understand why ancient cultures feared their mystics as much as they revered them. I am living that fear now." This woman had spent 2 years following every spiritual practice she could find, reading every book, attending every workshop, convinced that enlightenment would bring her the peace and happiness that seemed to elude her ordinary life. Instead, she found herself in a state that she could only describe as beautiful terror. Her perception had become so heightened that she could see the hidden suffering behind every smile, feel the desperate loneliness radiating from crowded rooms, sense the vast cosmic indifference that lurks beneath our human attempts at meaning-making. She was experiencing what Mircea Eliade, the great scholar of religions, called the terrible gift of sacred sight, the ability to perceive reality without the protective filters that keep most of us functionally sane. What she discovered, and what every genuine seeker eventually discovers, is that the spiritual path is not a journey toward comfort and happiness. It is a descent into the fundamental madness that exists at the core of human existence, and most people who begin this journey never make it back to anything resembling normal life. But here is what fascinated Eliade about this process. He realized that this madness is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough into dimensions of reality that our rational mind cannot process, and for those brave enough to navigate it consciously, it becomes the doorway to a way of being that transcends both sanity and insanity, as we typically understand them. Think about the last time you felt completely satisfied with your life, when everything seemed to make perfect sense and you had no questions about your purpose or direction. If you are honest, you probably cannot remember such a time, or if you can, it lasted only a few hours or days before that familiar restlessness returned. This restlessness, this constant sense that something essential is missing from your experience, is not a personal problem that you need to solve. According to Eliade, it is the most natural and universal human condition, the inevitable result of being conscious beings who have lost their direct connection to the sacred source of existence. He called this condition the nostalgia for paradise, and he discovered through his extensive research into religious traditions around the world that every culture in history has recognized this fundamental homesickness as the starting point of authentic spiritual life. The pain you feel when you sense the emptiness beneath your achievements, the loneliness that persists even when you are surrounded by people who care about you, the inexplicable sadness that sometimes overwhelms you for no apparent reason, these are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something is working exactly as it should, that your soul is refusing to accept the artificial substitutes for meaning and connection that our culture offers as sufficient for a human life. But here is where most spiritual teachings become dangerous rather than helpful. They promise you that if you follow their methods, if you meditate correctly or pray sincerely enough or adopt the right beliefs, you will eventually find your way back to that paradise of wholeness and peace that you have lost. What they do not tell you is that the journey toward this promised land requires you to pass through territories of consciousness that can shatter everything you think you know about yourself and reality. Eliade understood, based on his own experiences and his study of mystics and shamans throughout history, that authentic spiritual awakening always begins with what he called ontological shock, the terrifying recognition that the world you have been living in is not the world that actually exists. This shock comes not from learning new information or adopting different beliefs, but from a direct perception of the arbitrariness and fragility of everything you have taken for granted as solid and permanent. You realize that your personality, your relationships, your goals, your entire sense of identity are constructions that could dissolve at any moment, leaving you face to face with something so vast and incomprehensible that your rational mind cannot find any way to organize or control it. Most people who experience this ontological shock immediately retreat into familiar patterns of thinking and behavior, desperate to restore their sense of security and predictability. They might throw themselves into work or relationships or various forms of entertainment, anything that will distract them from the vertigo of recognizing how little they actually understand about their own existence. But some people, for reasons that remain mysterious, cannot turn away from what they have seen. They are compelled to keep exploring these unstable territories of consciousness, even though they have no map and no guarantee that they will find anything resembling solid ground on the other side. These are the people who become what Eliade called homo religiosus, beings who have accepted that their primary relationship is not with the human world of social conventions and practical concerns, but with the mysterious forces that create and sustain all existence. This acceptance changes everything about how they experience daily life, because they can no longer take anything for granted or assume that the surface appearance of any situation reveals its deeper significance. You know what touches me most when I read your messages? It is realizing that we are not alone in this search. If you are listening to me now and feel that emptiness, that sensation that something important is missing in your life, I want you to know that I understand exactly what you are going through. There were moments when I also felt completely disconnected from the sacred, lost in the midst of a routine that seemed to suck all the magic out of existence. That is why I want to ask you a very direct question. What was the last moment you felt there was something greater than yourself present in your life? It could have been contemplating a sunset, listening to music, or simply in an instant of silence. If you feel comfortable, write in the comments, "I miss the sacred in my daily life," and briefly tell when that last moment was. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone in this journey. And I promise I will read each comment with the care it deserves. The transformation into Homo religiosus is not a gentle process of gradual enlightenment. It is more like being struck by lightning repeatedly while trying to maintain your balance on shifting ground. Eliade discovered through his research into shamanic traditions that authentic spiritual initiates in every culture go through periods of what their communities recognized as sacred madness, times when their consciousness expands so rapidly that they temporarily lose the ability to function according to normal social expectations. During these periods, they might speak in symbols that others cannot understand, experience visions that seem more real than ordinary reality, or become so sensitive to the hidden dimensions of experience that they cannot tolerate the superficiality of everyday conversation and social interaction. Traditional cultures understood that this madness was not pathological, but necessary, a sign that the person was making contact with realms of existence that transcend ordinary human comprehension. What makes this transformation so disorienting is that it happens in layers, each one stripping away another assumption about how reality works until you find yourself in a completely alien landscape that somehow feels more familiar than the world you thought you knew. First, you might notice that your dreams become unusually vivid and meaningful, filled with symbols and encounters that seem to comment directly on your waking life situations. Then you begin seeing patterns and connections everywhere that others miss completely, as if someone has suddenly turned on lights in a room you didn't realize was dark. Conversations with strangers start feeling like scenes from a cosmic drama in which you are playing a role you don't remember auditioning for. Books fall open to exactly the passages you need to read. Numbers and symbols appear with such frequency and precision that dismissing them as coincidence becomes psychologically impossible. Your emotional sensitivity increases to the point where you can feel the unspoken pain and joy radiating from everyone around you, making crowded places almost unbearable and solitude absolutely essential for maintaining any sense of equilibrium. This is the stage that terrifies people who haven't been prepared for what authentic spiritual opening actually involves. From the outside, it looks like the person is losing their grip on reality, becoming paranoid or grandiose or obsessed with meaningless patterns and connections. Family members and friends begin expressing concern about your mental health, suggesting therapy or medication, or simply spending more time on practical activities that will ground you back in normal consciousness. But what they don't understand is that you haven't lost contact with reality. You have made contact with additional layers of reality that their perceptual filters are still blocking. And once those filters begin to dissolve, returning to limited awareness feels like deliberately blinding yourself to dimensions of existence that are more beautiful and meaningful than anything you experienced when your consciousness was safely contained within conventional boundaries. But in our contemporary culture, we have lost the wisdom to distinguish between sacred madness and psychological breakdown. When someone begins showing signs of expanded consciousness, experiencing synchronicities and symbols and visions that reveal the deeper patterns operating beneath surface appearances, they are likely to be diagnosed with mental illness, rather than recognized as undergoing spiritual transformation. This misunderstanding can be devastating for people who are actually in the midst of authentic awakening, but receive messages from their families, friends, and medical professionals that their experiences are symptoms of disease, rather than signs of breakthrough into broader dimensions of awareness. Without proper guidance and support, Many genuine mystics end up believing that their expanded perception is evidence of mental instability, and they either suppress their spiritual gifts through medication and therapy designed to restore normal consciousness, or they become lost in grandiose fantasies that prevent them from integrating their insights into practical wisdom. The tragedy of this misunderstanding extends beyond individual suffering to affect our entire culture's relationship with transcendent dimensions of existence. When we pathologize expanded consciousness instead of learning how to support people through authentic spiritual crisis, we lose access to the insights and creative breakthroughs that often emerge from these periods of radical opening. Many of history's greatest artists, scientists, and spiritual teachers went through phases of what their contemporaries considered madness, but which actually represented periods of contact with sources of inspiration and understanding that are not accessible to ordinary rational consciousness. By medicating these experiences away or dismissing them as symptoms of mental illness, we may be preventing exactly the kind of consciousness expansion that our world desperately needs to address the spiritual poverty and ecological crisis that threaten our survival as a species. Eliade himself went through several periods of this disorienting expansion during his youth, times when his studies of mysticism and religious traditions opened him to experiences that threatened to overwhelm his capacity for ordinary functioning. He wrote about days when every book he encountered seemed to contain messages specifically intended for his spiritual development, when chance meetings with strangers felt like divine appointments, when numbers and symbols appeared everywhere he looked with meanings that seemed to reveal cosmic secrets about his personal destiny. During these periods, he found it almost impossible to maintain normal academic and social responsibilities, because everything felt charged with transcendent significance that demanded his complete attention and analysis. He described walking through the streets of Bucharest feeling like he was moving through a living mandala, where every person, every building, every passing cloud was positioned precisely to communicate some aspect of cosmic truth that he was supposed to decode and understand. The intensity of these experiences brought him to the edge of complete psychological breakdown several times. He would spend entire nights analyzing the mystical significance of random events, convinced that he was receiving direct guidance from spiritual masters who were monitoring his development and providing tests of his spiritual understanding. He began seeing his entire life as an elaborate initiation designed by cosmic forces to prepare him for some special mission that would be revealed when he had proven himself worthy through proper interpretation of the signs and symbols that surrounded him constantly. His journals from this period reveal someone whose relationship with ordinary reality had become so tenuous that he could barely function in social situations or maintain basic self-care, yet who was simultaneously experiencing insights into the nature of consciousness and reality that would later inform his groundbreaking scholarly work on religious symbolism and mythic thinking. What saved Eliade from being completely consumed by these experiences was his gradual recognition that the visions and insights he was receiving, while often genuine and profound, were being filtered through his own psychological needs and cultural conditioning in ways that made them both more dramatic and less practical than they needed to be. He learned to distinguish between authentic spiritual guidance and the projections of his own ego, which had a remarkable capacity to interpret even genuine mystical experiences in ways that fed his sense of being specially chosen or cosmically important. Most importantly, he discovered that the ultimate goal of authentic spiritual development is not to remain permanently in these expanded states, but to integrate the wisdom they provide into a way of living that serves both personal growth and the well-being of the larger human community. If you have been finding this discussion helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could take just a moment to hit the like button. Your engagement helps this content reach others who might be going through their own spiritual crisis and feeling confused about whether their experiences represent breakdown or breakthrough. The key insight that allowed Eliade to navigate these dangerous territories without losing himself permanently was his recognition that the goal of authentic spiritual development is not to remain in expanded states of consciousness, but to integrate the insights gained from those states into a way of living that honors both transcendent and ordinary dimensions of existence. He called this integration the recovery of sacred time within profane time, the ability to recognize the eternal dimension present in every moment while still being able to function effectively in the practical world of schedules and responsibilities and social relationships. This integration requires developing what he called symbolic consciousness, a way of perceiving that can simultaneously appreciate the literal and metaphorical dimensions of any experience without confusing them or privileging one over the other. For example, someone with integrated symbolic consciousness can participate fully in a business meeting, while also recognizing the archetypal patterns of power and creativity and conflict that are playing out beneath the surface discussion of budgets and strategies. They can enjoy a meal with friends while remaining aware of the deeper communion and nourishment that occurs when people share food and attention with genuine appreciation for each other's presence. They can perform routine household tasks while understanding these activities as forms of meditation and service that help maintain the sacred space of their home environment. This is not about imposing spiritual meaning onto ordinary activities, but about recognizing the spiritual dimension that was always present, but which most people have been trained to ignore or dismiss as irrelevant to practical concerns. The cultivation of symbolic consciousness requires enormous discipline and patience because it involves learning to hold multiple levels of awareness simultaneously without becoming overwhelmed by the complexity or confused about which level is most important in any given situation. You have to develop the discernment to recognize when your perception of deeper patterns and meanings represents genuine spiritual insight, and when it represents projection of your own psychological needs onto external circumstances. You have to learn to trust your intuitive understanding of situations while maintaining critical thinking that can evaluate your intuitions against practical evidence and feedback from others. Most challenging of all, you have to accept that this process of integration never ends, that every day will present new opportunities to practice living from this expanded awareness while remaining grounded in human compassion and practical wisdom. The practical challenges of this integration cannot be overstated. Imagine trying to explain to your family why you suddenly feel called to completely restructure your life priorities based on insights received during meditation that they consider at best wishful thinking and at worst signs of psychological instability. Picture yourself in a job interview trying to convey your qualifications while internally recognizing that the entire economic system within which this interaction is taking place represents a form of collective unconsciousness that is destroying both human souls and the planetary ecosystem. Consider what it feels like to attend social gatherings where everyone seems genuinely excited about topics and achievements that you now perceive as elaborate distractions from the essential questions of existence that no one wants to acknowledge or explore. This is not about becoming arrogant or dismissive toward people who haven't undergone spiritual awakening. It is about learning to navigate the profound loneliness that comes from seeing through cultural illusions that most people depend upon for their sense of meaning and security. You begin to understand why so many mystics throughout history chose to live as hermits or join monastic communities, where their expanded awareness would be understood and supported, rather than constantly challenged or pathologized. The temptation to withdraw completely from mainstream society can become almost overwhelming during certain stages of spiritual development, especially when you realize how much energy it requires to translate your perceptions and insights into language and behavior that won't alienate the people you love. But Eliade discovered that withdrawal, while sometimes necessary for short periods of intensive spiritual work, is ultimately not the solution to this integration challenge. The goal of authentic spiritual development is not to escape from the world, but to transform your relationship with the world so that you can participate fully in human life while maintaining constant connection to transcendent dimensions of meaning and purpose. This requires developing what he called practical mysticism, the ability to perform ordinary activities as forms of spiritual practice while remaining effective and helpful within conventional social and professional contexts. You learn to approach your work not just as a way to earn money, but as an opportunity to serve others and express whatever creative gifts have been entrusted to your care. You engage with family relationships not just as sources of personal satisfaction, but as contexts for practicing unconditional love and patience in the midst of inevitable human conflicts and misunderstandings. This practical mysticism manifests differently for each person, depending on their circumstances, temperament, and the specific insights they have received through their spiritual experiences. A teacher might discover ways to introduce contemplative practices and philosophical questioning into their classroom without violating educational guidelines or imposing their beliefs on students. A healthcare worker might learn to approach each patient interaction as an opportunity for healing that extends beyond mere medical treatment, to include genuine presence and compassion that honors the sacred dimension of human vulnerability. A parent might transform daily routines of childcare into rituals of gratitude and mindfulness that help their children develop natural reverence for the mystery and beauty of existence itself. The key insight that makes this integration possible is Eliade's understanding that sacred space and sacred time are not separate locations or special occasions that exist apart from ordinary life. They are qualities of attention and intention that can transform any environment and any moment into opportunities for spiritual practice and deeper communion with the source of all existence. When you approach the preparation of a meal as a form of meditation on the interconnectedness of all life, your kitchen becomes a temple and cooking becomes a sacramental act. When you listen to a friend's problems with the kind of presence and compassion that recognizes their suffering as your own, your conversation becomes a form of prayer, and your relationship becomes a vehicle for divine love to move through the world. Eliade found that people who successfully navigate this integration process without being destroyed by it are those who maintain what he called creative fidelity to authentic tradition, while remaining open to new forms of spiritual expression that are relevant to contemporary circumstances. They study the wisdom of ancient mystics and shamans not to copy their specific practices, but to understand the universal principles that guided their spiritual development across different cultural contexts. They develop personal rituals and practices that help them maintain connection to transcendent dimensions while fulfilling their responsibilities as parents, workers, citizens, and friends. They seek out communities of fellow seekers who can provide support and reality checking during difficult periods of growth and transformation. Most importantly, they understand that their spiritual development serves not only their personal fulfillment, but the healing and awakening of human consciousness as a whole. The madness that can emerge from authentic spiritual seeking is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be approached with proper preparation, guidance, and respect for both its dangers and its gifts. Traditional cultures developed elaborate systems of initiation and apprenticeship, precisely because they understood that contact with transcendent realities can be overwhelming for unprepared consciousness. They created rituals and ceremonies that allowed people to experience expanded awareness in controlled contexts, where they could receive support and interpretation from elders who had navigated similar territories successfully. They recognized that the insights gained from these experiences needed to be integrated slowly and carefully into ordinary life, rather than acted upon impulsively or used to justify abandoning practical responsibilities and social relationships. In our contemporary situation, most of us must create our own support systems and develop our own methods for safe exploration of expanded consciousness. This might involve working with experienced spiritual teachers who understand both the promises and dangers of authentic transformation. It might mean establishing regular practices of meditation, contemplation, or prayer that help stabilize your awareness and provide refuge during periods of intense spiritual opening. It might require finding or creating communities of fellow seekers who can offer understanding and encouragement when your family and friends cannot relate to what you are experiencing. Most importantly, it requires developing the patience to allow your spiritual insights to mature and integrate naturally, rather than forcing dramatic changes in your life based on temporary experiences of expanded awareness. If you have made it this far, it is because something inside you recognizes that there is a different path, a deeper way to understand your own spiritual journey. I know what it is like to feel lost amid so much noise of the modern world, seeking answers that always seem to slip through your fingers. That is why I created this space, this refuge where we can explore together the ancient wisdom that still pulses alive in our hearts. When you subscribe to this channel, you are not just clicking a button. You are joining a community of people who, like you, feel that life has deeper layers waiting to be discovered. Here you will find not just knowledge, but genuine embrace for your thirst for meaning. Subscribe now and be part of this journey of rediscovering the sacred in everyday life. Your soul deserves this gift. The journey that begins with pain and proceeds through various forms of beautiful madness ultimately leads to what Eliade called the restoration of paradise, not as a return to some lost golden age, but as the discovery of the sacred dimension that has always been present within ordinary experience, waiting for consciousness capable of recognizing and honoring its reality. This restoration does not eliminate suffering or guarantee happiness in any conventional sense. Instead, it provides a context for understanding suffering as potentially meaningful and transformative, rather than simply something to be avoided or eliminated. It offers a way of engaging with the inevitable challenges and losses of human existence that can deepen rather than diminish your sense of connection to the source of all life. Remember that sharing wisdom is itself a sacred act, a way of honoring the traditions that have preserved these teachings through centuries of cultural change and upheaval. When you share insights that have helped you with others who are struggling with similar questions, you become part of this ancient lineage of transmission, helping to ensure that future generations will have access to the knowledge they need for their own spiritual journeys. The path continues, not toward some final destination where all seeking ends, but toward deeper and more nuanced ways of living the questions that first called you to this exploration of the sacred dimension of human existence.